So we've been working on the mandatory reporter thing, showing that I've been going to mandatory reporters. Here's what a mandatory reporter must report. Of course, you guys don't believe any of the laws or anything like that, so apparently you guys believe the AI. So we're going to read the AI overview. It says a mandatory reporter must report any reasonable suspicion of abuse or neglect involving vulnerable populations, primarily children and sometimes the elderly or disabled, including physical, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, like dangerous living conditions, and exploitation, providing details like names, ages, instance specifics, and perpetrator info immediately or within a short time frame, e.g. 24 to 48 hours, to Child Protective Services or law enforcement. So again, they specifically focus on children, but there's also adult protective services. And they don't put that in there because, again, the focus is always on children, even though the laws are supposed to protect all of us. When you research it, it just pops up the children's stuff most of the time, which is horrible because the rest of us are human beings too. Just because you're disabled doesn't mean that a crime has not been committed. It doesn't mean that you are not vulnerable. It doesn't mean that nobody can harm you. Just because you're an adult doesn't mean that you can't be vulnerable. And that's the point of this whole mental ill thing. It's used as a tool to ignore victims, to discredit victims. Mandatory reporters have a duty to report. It says key elements to include in the report: child's or victim's name, age, or location, names/addresses of parents or caregivers, nature, extent, and details of abuse and neglect, information on previous incidents or risk factors. Previous incidents, you see that? All this stuff that these quote-unquote mandatory reporters are recorded saying on my channel, things like it's in the past. No, it's important. Why aren't you writing it down? Why aren't you reporting it? And you get to hear them in those videos many, many times. When I try to show them the evidence, they say, oh no, I don't need to see it, I believe you. We're going to go into that stuff in just a minute. It says when to report: when you have reasonable cause to suspect neglect. Oh, sorry, let me read it in angle. The phone's not in the way. When you have reasonable cause to suspect abuse or neglect, even if you're not certain. Immediately or within a short time frame, e.g. 24 to 48 hours, depending on the state law. Sorry, my mouth is dry and I have a stuttering issue. Let's see, it says it's a 24/7 obligation covering work and personal time. And this one right here, this is the one that you get to hear them making the excuse all the time of, oh, well, my paid job. And they go back and forth between whether they are or are not a mandatory reporter. They have to go ask their boss, who has to go ask their attorney. And they refuse to look at the evidence. The guy that they have that's been supposedly working with me, he's not a mandatory reporter. His boss is, but his boss isn't looking at it. And of course, some of the people that I'm trying to turn in are his coworkers, which obviously isn't doing any good. It says, who must report? Common examples: healthcare professionals, teachers, social workers. They claim to be social workers, don't they? Child care providers, law enforcement, university employees, youth organization staff. Where to report: Child Protective Services Hotline, e.g. Oregon's 855-503-SAFE, or local law enforcement. Now, what happens when these services don't care, when they won't investigate because they've already decided that you're quote-unquote mentally ill? which to them means schizophrenic or delusional. We're going to go to Colorado law here in specific. So it said, yes, in Colorado, law enforcement peace officers are mandatory reporters of suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation of vulnerable adults, at-risk adults, typically 18 plus with disabilities or 70 plus, including in Adams County. They must report within 24 hours, and failure to do so is a crime, often requiring reports to Adams County Adult Protective Services or 911 for immediate danger. And I was, in fact and indeed, immediately put in danger. Not that I wasn't already. Now, I repeatedly tried to turn in the threats, harassment, and assaults by Natalie Bollinger and her friends before Natalie's death, over and over again, and was prevented from doing so. Police were either very short with me or talked to me like I was retarded. It said, who must report? Mandatory reporters. Colorado specifically lists various professionals, including law enforcement, that'd be peace officers, including detectives. I want to show you something here. That right there, this is me being assaulted by officers. Of course, the way they reported it is that, you guys can go ahead and play it. This is the A&E thing on Natalie Bollinger. But you can see earlier in it, hold on a second. This is Jai Rogers. This is Matthew Peterson. This is me. I want you to hear something. Now, if you notice that there's sound to that, also this was aired 5 years after Natalie's death. So when Amanda Balehash told me that she couldn't get it, it didn't exist, so on and so forth, it had been destroyed, a bunch of other crap. Well, obviously it hadn't been. Now, in this, they get to see abuse on the computer, threats towards me, harassment towards me, people making fake accounts to harass me. But that's not what they post on this A&E thing. No, they went out of their way to completely lie about the situation, just as the police did. It's not the only time that they did it. Now, I was responding to direct threats and repeated assaults right after this situation, everywhere that I went. Being harassed, being threatened, being bullied. And when I called my friends, or people who claimed to be my friends, they were too busy talking over me. Too busy telling me what to do, what to think, and what to feel. This is... More fingers for you.
Well, do you know what happened to her?
No. You know who does?
Tell me.
How would I know? What happened to Natalie? What do you guys know? All I know is from Facebook Messenger, and I hate Facebook.
What did Facebook Messenger say?
It doesn't matter. You need to get a hold of the police and talk to them. And of course, they got the slight droning music in the background, trying to make me sound as ominous as possible, and so on and so forth. Like, through all of this, what I was trying to do is get help as a victim of abuse. What they paint me as is some horrible excuse for a human being out to harm people. There's a difference between not trying to turn something in and being prevented from doing so. Okay, so you can see these aren't the only tactics, but these are words and phrases they use, and you can see all of these things in every single one of these situations where I did, in fact and indeed, tell mandatory reporters about the abuse and show them to the best of my ability, if they would allow it, which, yeah, when they looked at the evidence, Jai Rogers and Detective Peterson, when they saw the evidence that I had to show, it was obvious that I wasn't out to hurt anybody, that I was a victim. That these people had been harassing me and stalking me and threatening me for over a year. I showed him the messages from Tim Beeson. I showed them some of the fake accounts that people had made. One of them was a guy named Riley Johnson, and he was actually a friend of mine, so they made a fake account to harass me in emails using his name. I showed them that I was the one being stalked. Now it says mandatory reporters who want to avoid making a report often use specific words and phrases to minimize the severity of the situation, justify the inaction, or suggest the issue falls outside the legal definition of abuse or their reporting obligations. These things are more likely to happen if you go in alone, and I'll show you the paperwork for that. If you go in alone, they get to pretend that it's not credible. That's one of the things about if they refuse to do their job to begin with, then they've broken the law. Once they've broken the law, it's no longer lawful for them to send you to these people. But that's what they do anyway. For example, the situation with Shelley and the situation with Melissa, and the situation with Care altogether. Being told that I have to go back to this service that claims that they only help with housing, but they do have mandatory reporters, apparently. And then they don't actually help me to get housing. So they want to change the subject. All right, it says minimizing or dismissing concerns. They say it's a family matter or it's a private issue. They also say those things like, for example, they say, well, that's a police matter or it's somebody else's matter. Well, whether it's their matter or not, they need to take it seriously. And the police aren't taking it seriously because I have to try to talk to them alone. My disabilities, nobody cares about them unless they wanted to use it to take advantage of me. That's why many of these mandatory reporters, both at CARE and TFCC, especially here in Tillamook, they want to pull these exact things over and over again, and we've got them recorded doing it. It says it's not that serious or there's no immediate danger. No, there's an ongoing danger. Or here it says it's just a misunderstanding or personality conflict. Or another thing they say is, well, it's a back and forth thing. No, it's not. It's people harming me and me speaking up. When it gets to the point where I am acting the way that my predators are acting towards me, I don't get anywhere near as horrible as they do because I don't go running around touching people. I don't go running around assaulting people. If you're going to call me names, yes, it's okay for me to call you names back. On the other hand, I tried to turn it in every single situation. I tried to turn it into the mandatory reporters, the people that I am supposed to turn it into as a disabled adult. Instead, mandatory reporters, after realizing how bad they screwed up, just wanted to play the pretending I'm delusional thing. Now we've got multiple evaluations, some of them from the state hospital, most of them from certified forensics evaluators showing that I'm not schizophrenic, I'm not delusional, and that they saw the abuse. Now, did they turn it in? No. Did my attorney, who was a part of one of those conversations, turn it in? No. Here's one. They're just old or confused, i.e., the mentally ill, aid and assist, uh, delusional, schizophrenic. Yeah, this is illegal, what they're doing. And I've recorded them doing it over and over again. So we're going to post the links to some of those conversations below. The next one says the victim is being difficult or uncooperative. That's where they One example, pretend that you're yelling at them when you're not. They talk over you like you're an idiot. They won't hear your side. No attorneys, none of these people. What they want to do is talk over it. Now, you guys got to see part of the list of the things that they're supposed to find out, the things that I'm trying to tell them. When you say, oh, you're rambling, well, listen to the information that I'm rambling off. Is it on that list? Absolutely. Everything there is on that list. I give them a brief overview of what I've been going through, and then I start telling them details, the who, what, when, where, and why, previous history. They don't want to hear any of that, though, do they? And this is a very major issue. Then, of course, I'm dependent on these people for my resources and for assistance with my resources, and they're not assisting me with those resources. So I'm trying to do it the way that I'm supposed to, and I'm going to the people that I'm supposed to now, aren't I? Shifting responsibility. So this would be the police sending me to CARE or TFCC or Northwest Senior and Disability Services or Oregon Department of Human Services, only for all of those services to have me fill out housing paperwork and tell me I need to go to the other services and go to the police. And like I said, going around in circles. And we've gotten to hear the voices of several other victims of that as well. Same place, same people. Tillamook, Oregon. Said shifting responsibility. Someone else will report it, or I assume someone else already reported it. It's kind of like Deputy Taylor. When he knew that the other deputies were treating me like I was schizophrenic, he finally filled out one of those inmate request forms and verified that I was telling the truth about the Natalie Bollinger situation. They already knew. They were all well aware that it was a very real situation. But they were still continuing to try to pretend that I was delusional and schizophrenic. So, what he had to say about the situation is, Sean, anybody can look it up on the internet. I assumed that they would look it up. Like, no, dude, they didn't. The reason that Deputy Taylor knows that it's not a schizophrenic delusion is because he followed the Natalie Bollinger case. But to anybody else who hasn't followed it, it's just going to sound like a schizophrenic delusion now, isn't it? That's why you need a friend or family member to go in with you. Well, one of the reasons. Here's another one. It's not my job, department, or scope. And how many times have we heard exactly those words? It's not their job, it's not their department, it's not their scope, over and over and over again. These are illegal things to do to a victim, but I go in alone and they think that it's okay. It's absolutely not. The next one, it says, I'm not an investigator, I can't be sure abuse occurred. How many of these people have said, we're not an investigator, it's not our job to investigate, or what's the other one that Sean was using? Um, it's not our job to gather evidence, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, it goes under the I can't be sure abuse occurred. Well, of course not. They're refusing to look at any evidence. They're refusing to write anything down, and they refuse to turn anything in. And then, of course, the past abuse that has been neglected by their agencies, they want to say, oh, well, it's in the past. It's in the past. No, it's frequent and ongoing abuse. Here's another one. I don't have enough proof, or it's just hearsay. It's not hearsay if there's video evidence. When there's video evidence of people physically assaulting me over crimes that I've literally never been charged with, let alone convicted of, that's horrible. let alone the fact that the supposed victim never accused me of doing any such thing. So here's the thing, if the supposed victim never accused me of any such thing, and there's video evidence that this is what these people are using as an excuse to physically harm me, to threaten my life, to threaten my friends' and family's lives, you've gotten to hear in that video with Russell how Russell has seen evidence that I'm telling the truth, but he's not a mandatory reporter, so apparently he's under no obligation, shifting the blame and also shifting the responsibility. It's not their fault. The guy that they're shifting the blame and responsibility onto, apparently in this, isn't just me, it's also Russell. It's not their fault. They're mandatory reporters, but the guy that I'm working with isn't, and he doesn't know, he doesn't know, he doesn't know. Why do they refuse to look at evidence and interrupt at the parts that are most important? It's called plausible deniability. They pretend they don't know anything. Or here's one, we've got this one a lot. It says it falls under privilege and confidentiality, used incorrectly for non-privileged situations. That's right. Now, how many times have I told you that? Reporting of abuse is not privileged. There is some privilege in turning it in. Absolutely. You're supposed to be protected if you do your job, but if you don't do your job, you're committing a crime. And if crimes continue to be committed against the victim, well, then there's more crimes that you have committed according to the law. There's also when you try to cover it up, when you try to ignore the abuse, when you work together with others to prevent the victim from being heard, when you make it impossible for the victim to send any of the actual evidence, all they can do is talk to you about it over the phone. You won't take it serious in person, won't look at it in person, running out all of our resources. Here's one, citing potential negative outcomes. A report might make things worse for the victim. Well, in this case, it won't. I'm asking them to do their jobs instead of repeatedly allowing people to harm me by pretending that I'm delusional and schizophrenic over something that any idiot can look up on the internet. It says right here, I need to protect client confidentiality and trust. Yes, that's one of the reasons that they, instead of giving my file to me at care, the only thing in my file is my intakes. That's the stuff that when you fill it out, they show the government that you filled those out and they get money. If they did their jobs as mandatory reporters or actually helped me to get into housing, this would be a much different story. It's 2025, and I first filled out their paperwork in 2022 for housing. Or here's another one. The victim doesn't want me to report. That's absolutely not true. Obviously, I've been trying to get them to report. And it's 24/7. Even if they're off duty, they still have a duty to report. They don't bother with the previous history. They don't bother with the evidence. See, that's something since Natalie's death that's been ongoing. Police officers screwed up really bad before she was killed. So did the therapist that I had. That includes Jeff Ritter. That includes Nicole Peralta. I was sent back to Jeff Ritter and Nicole Peralta after Natalie was killed. Can you imagine that? So, we've shown my psychological stuff going back for quite a few years, several states. Obviously, I am neither schizophrenic nor delusional, yet the only thing that they will allow in court is hearsay, slander, and, of course, framing. If you take it out of context, that is framing. If you intentionally cut out the context, that is framing. One of the things about being assaulted at Clearview is that they start the video about halfway through the situation. I'd like to remind you that Clearview Behavioral Health was permanently shut down because they killed a man and were committing Medicare and Medicaid fraud, holding people longer than they were supposed to. I might also remind you that one of the tactics that police use when they want to prevent you from turning them in is to arrest you, which prevents you from having access to your phone, or they try to put you on suicide watch to prevent you from having access to your phone. Mandatory reporters all do this. They don't care if you are actually being harmed. What they care about is if you want to hurt yourself or somebody else. Many of the people who pretended to be victims in these situations were people who had actually threatened me, harassed me, and intimidated me more than once. Then I'm supposed to go in and try to make a report or fill out paperwork that's absolutely going nowhere. In Colorado, some of the stuff that I tried to turn in before Natalie was killed, they refused to allow me to turn it in because I didn't have the social security number of the people who I was trying to turn in. That was Tim Beeson, very specifically. I also didn't have the address. I was also trying to turn in Natalie, Alicia, and Maddie, and I didn't have all of their information either. And I went to mandatory reporters and I told them what was going on, and they just wanted to give bad advice. They wanted to tell me to do some very stupid things. Like, well, you should try to settle it out of court. You ever think about maybe telling her what's going on, telling her how it makes you feel, letting her know this is happening to you? Like, yeah, yes, I tried that already. I mean, there's not a lot of options that you have when you have people who are threatening to kill you and your friends and family, and people are physically assaulting you when you go to see your friends and family. There's not a lot of options. You go to the police. If they tell you to do something, you do it. If they tell you that there's no services in western Nebraska, so you need to go to the Front Range of Colorado, well, that's where you go. But see, what they're telling you to do is it's costing you thousands of dollars to do these things, to travel from one place to another, to continually move to a place where supposedly there will be help. No, in Colorado, they didn't care that these people were threatening to kill me either. This was all before Natalie was killed. I went to the mandatory reporters I was supposed to. It says technical or bureaucratic language to create ambiguity. We don't have reasonable cause to believe. It doesn't, see, if they don't look at the evidence, if they refuse to look at it or make it so that you can't show them the evidence, such as in the lower building there, they have internet and they claim that they can't look at any of the YouTube videos. But I can pull up the YouTube videos and show them in the upper building, which is where me and Russell were in that conversation. Whereas Shelley would only do things down in the lower building. And I repeatedly, said to her, hey, let's go to the upper building so I can show you. Oh, I don't need to see it. I believe you. I don't need to see it. I believe you. But then they never look. They never look. It says here it doesn't meet the state specific definition of abuse or neglect. Actually, they do. They absolutely do. It's not an articulable fact. Are you sure? Or I need to consult legal counsel first. Now, what is it that Sean Hubert did? Of course, he went and talked to his apparently legal counsel. Like I said, it says mandatory reporters are legally required to report when they have a reasonable suspicion of abuse and are not responsible for proving the abuse occurred. That is the role of adult protective services or law enforcement, who, as we know, are refusing to look at anything anyway. But besides that, we've got mandatory reporters who aren't getting the information they need to, even though I'm telling it to them. Now, if I ask them to read it back, we've done that plenty of times with 988 and many other supposed mandatory reporting hotlines, haven't we? And when we call them, they want to focus on the